Okay, Meg, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're there before I start the reading. And we're using Zoom for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. The chair can request that members of the public provide their names for purposes of keeping accurate minutes of the meeting. Attendees must you don't need to register, but you need to use the link that can be found in the description of the agenda. I guess I'm kind of paraphrasing and editing that line. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click to raise their hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in an order they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Dave Iverson.
Here.
Brooke Mohr.
Here.
Penny Dye.
Here.
Meg Browers.
Here.
Great, thank you. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tucker Holland.
Here.
And Vicky Marsh.
Here.
I think that's it. Anticipated speakers, I don't believe we necessarily have any on the agenda today. Do we, Tucker? Am I wrong?
Mr. Chair, not necessarily an anticipated speaker, but I would very much like to recognize that we have Anna Martinez, Dr. Howard Dickler's widow, with us here today, and we so appreciate her attendance.
Thank you very much, Tucker. I really appreciate being invited to join this call.
Welcome, Anna. Thank
you
you for being here. Good afternoon. This is an open meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust, and it's being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that the meeting is being recorded. All attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you have broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, question, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any responses, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call. With that, move over to the agenda. And I will call the meeting to order. And with the second item, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Brooke. Any discussion? Seeing none, vote by roll call. Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Brooke Mohr.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. With that, an approval of minutes. Tucker, can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair. So that's kind of a standard item that we have on the agenda. We don't have any minutes to approve today, but we will have at our regular May meeting at scheduled for May 16th.
Penny?
Yeah, just a quick question. The only minutes that we haven't seen are the ones for last week, right?
I believe there may be one prior,
Okay.
I think there's one prior as well.
yeah, one prior meeting minute as well.
All right, thank
So,
you.
Little bit of a challenging time with our departure of our prior housing and real estate office manager.
Understand. Thank you.
But we did actually, I will report just briefly, interview a couple of candidates this morning.
Exciting. Okay, with that, we'll take no action on approval of minutes and move on to item 4, public comment. We have a handful of members of the public. Does anybody have any public comment for us? Any board members as members of the public? Seeing no action, I'll close public comment. Item 5, 135 and 137 Orange Street RFP update. I think this is pretty standard, Tucker, that the RFP has been issued on the town's procurement section of the website and is available for people to review, download, and register for. Is there more to it than that?
No, that's exactly right, Mr. Chair. We simply wanted to use the opportunity with the meeting today to spread the word that the RFP was published last Wednesday and is available, as you noted, through registering on the town's website under the procurement section. I'll maybe just mention a couple of dates that are included on the RFP. There is a upcoming registration deadline of May 24th in advance of a pre-proposal meeting and site tour scheduled for Wednesday, May 31st. This is an opportunity for folks who may be considering submitting a bid to come and learn more about the particular location and ask questions of relevant town officials. There is an inquiries deadline that is scheduled for July 26th at 1 o'clock and a proposal submission deadline of August 23rd at 3 p.m. Finally, there would be proposal presentations that would occur on Tuesday, September 5th, and it would be intended that on the presumption of worthy proposals, a developer would be selected about a month or so after that proposal presentation date. So again, I would direct people to the procurement section of the town website to learn more details, and any inquiries or questions related to the RFP should be directed through the email address noted there.
Great. Thank you, Tucker. Are there any questions from members of the board? Seeing none. Any questions from the public? Seeing no action, will close the update on 135, 137 Orange Street RFP and move to item 6, discussion of 2023 warrant articles for housing funding. Tucker, I'm going to have you kind of lead this and then let board members jump in as needed.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item was included at the request of the board at the last meeting to talk about the different articles that are going to be before the community at town meeting on Saturday. There are several articles that in one manner or another relate to housing funding. Those would be Article 8, which is the basically the general fund operating budget for the housing and real estate office. There is Article 10, which has to do with capital expenditures, and within that article there is approximately $1 million appropriation along with a $4 million bonding authority Article 18, as the board is familiar, relates to the $6.5 million permanent override being proposed by town administration. Article 34 has to do with the Community Preservation Committee annual grant recommendations regarding housing. And this year, they principally have to do with servicing the bond obligations associated with the two $5 million bondings that the CBC approved back in 2019 and 2021. Finally, there is Article 35, which is a citizen article being put forward by Arthur Reed with respect to establishing a stabilization fund and a allocation of the short-term rental revenue in order to fund that.
Thank you, Tucker. Members of the board, do you want to take these one by one, ask any general questions overall, or do you want to just pick a particular one to discuss or have questions? Penny?
Yeah, so I'm going to say again, I'm concerned about 18 in that it involves a Proposition 2.5 override at the ballot. And I'm concerned about the likelihood of that passing.
I would agree. It makes me nervous to have the future of affordable housing hinged on two vote opportunities.
Right.
And it's scary with the progress that we've been making that there's a lot of eggs in that basket. But fingers crossed the community comes together for us.
As they have.
As
I also want to mention on 35, I understand there may be a modification to that in terms of the amount that's being asked for. I strongly feel that the room occupancy tax under which the short-term revenue tax income falls, some portion of that needs to be redirected from the general fund specifically towards affordable and attainable housing.
Thank you, Penny. Does anybody want to follow up? Brooke?
Yeah, I mean, the discussion at the select board level is that this is the route that was recommended by the finance department and town administration in terms of their overall future proofing both the town budget and securing an ongoing funding stream for affordable housing. So in my role on the select board, I'm supporting that path with the permanent override for that reason, because I am relying on our finance director to tell me as a select board member, what is the best way to protect both our funding for affordable housing and the general fund and, the tax revenue to run the town of Nantucket. And that's why this route was selected by and recommended by the finance department and town administration to the select board. So yes, I believe that there is risk. And I also, I feel pretty strongly that we have been advocating, I have been advocating long before I was a select board member for a greater financial commitment through tax revenue and by any means, right? But the fact that the shift in commitment from the finance department and town administration toward investing in solving this problem in a big way without risking staffing and other, budgetary priorities for the town. So the case can be made for the community. And I think what I've been saying to a lot of people is, we've teed up the ball here, and as difficult as a two-step process might be, this is where the rubber hits the road for the community of, are we going to do this, or are we going to be talking about it 10 years from now again? And I think what the town has said is we're committed to finding, and Brian Turbot said to me this morning, listen, I don't love to propose tax override. He said, that's not a tool I like to pull out of my toolbox very often, but if we're going to solve this, and hopefully I'm quoting or paraphrasing him appropriately, if we're going to solve this, we have to make a financial commitment and make it long-term and predictable so that this board can do the work it needs to do to really address this problem. So that's where I'm coming at, and I hope the community hears us.
Thank you, Brooke. Penny?
Yeah, I want to say I agree with everything Brooke said, except for the fact that this requires an override. The town cannot speak for the people of the town. The people govern this town, and they have a vote at the ballot. And I just think it's very, very risky. Flipping back to 35 for a second, the Arthur Reed sponsored article to take a portion of the room occupancy tax, which, by the way, our finance director referred to as an unreliable source of income, which is now going largely into the general, I think entirely into the general fund, as an argument for why we shouldn't be interested in securing some of that. To me, that funding is directly related to the popularity of Nantucket. The vast majority is paid by people who are renting here, not owning, in visiting here in the summer months. And I think we should be harnessing that very activity to try and financially offset some of the challenges we face because of Nantucket's popularity, similar to what the land bank did in 1984. Thank you.
Tucker, I have a question. Thank you, Penny. I have a question related to, I guess, for lack of better phrase, the buckets that these fundings will be able to service. I'm assuming that all of them will have a threshold of $100,000 that will need select board approval, but can they all be applied through all varieties of AMI levels?
So, yes, I mean, the practice has been that this is my understanding, Mr. Chair, and perhaps Attorney Marsh can comment if I am misstating anything, but my understanding is that what town meeting does, if it approves a funding article, is basically giving authority to the town manager to spend the monies in accordance with the article. And by practice, it's been that housing related funding, the town manager has directed the responsibility of administering those funds to the Affordable Housing Trust. So presuming that would happen again in either case, you are absolutely correct that it is the trust would have to operate under the same $100,000 rule.
Authorizations. Okay, yeah. Great. Penny, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a very quick question here. What if somebody knows the answer to this, and so far nobody's been able to answer it? What happens if the $6.5 million gets voted, approved at town meeting, and fails at the ballot? How does that impact us?
Vicky is raising her hand. Vicky?
Doesn't pass. There's no funding of $6.5 million this year. You would have to go back and perhaps try to do it in the fall, try to do something else at the fall town meeting then.
Thank you.
So it'd really be the bonding is its own article, so that previous spending is okay. If this doesn't pass housing stabilization, we have general operating monies available to continue our programs, but no new programmatical opportunities would be available, or no new purchases would be available. I think that's the kind of the breakdown. Penny, then Tucker.
Yeah, just very quickly. It's interesting also the order in which these are appearing on the warrant and the order in which they'll be heard at town meeting. So we will know, for instance, what happens with 18 before we have to discuss and vote upon 35.
Tucker.
Penny, I actually have a question that Penny may be able to answer, just knowing her familiarity with the article. But if Article 35 were to pass, that would also not take immediate effect, would it?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
It would not go into effect till next year.
Yeah, exactly. So in sort of in either case, in a way, the other thing I'm trying to, in a sense, get inside the finance director's head and clarify one aspect as I understand it about the unstable source of revenue comment. I think one of the points he made before the Finance Committee, when they ultimately recommended Article 18, was that if we're interested in having the ability to have these 6.5 million bonded, and there is no bonding authorization associated with that article for this town meeting, just to be clear. But if we are ultimately interested in having the funds available for bonding, I think the point that the finance director was making was that the 6.5 is a fixed figure, and in terms of underwriting, they would look at that more robustly than a revenue source that can change from year to year, where they would have to make more conservative assumptions. I think that was something I understood him to be speaking to.
If I
Thank you,
may,
Tucker. Brooke?
additionally, a stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote to come out. So it really becomes a revenue stream that can't be used for borrowing because its use would have to be voted on year by year. So the town would have to commit other dollars to a borrowing. So it's really a constrained source of revenue that would not really allow for borrowing, because it would rely on a 2/3 vote the following town meeting and every town meeting thereafter. So I'm not sure anyone would lend subject to a 2/3 vote at town meeting year by year, I think is kind of the way I would summarize why it's less appealing from that perspective. So, or less flexible, less appealing to me, less flexible.
Different uses. Okay. Any more on the ones we've discussed? I got you, Rick. Hang on one second. Any discussion on any of the new articles? Okay, I'm going to open. Mr. Atherton has some points. We'll turn to the public. Go ahead, Rick.
Brian, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I just want to share a couple of observations on 18. I think Penny's concern is something you ought to all take very seriously. I don't think it helps the program if it doesn't pass. And I just say right up front with you, I don't think 18 is the right way to go right now. I think the town has shown it's willing to allocate substantial community tax-based resources for the programs that you want to initiate. And I think it will continue to do so. I think we'd be better off to table Article 18, come back in the fall. If you need 6 million to carry out your current programs and get to the 10% state requirement, or if you need more, I think the town would be very willing. But committing this amount of money, which over 10 years will be, with the 2.5 will be 70 million, over 20, it's more likely $150 million. It seems to me the town voters would like more ongoing say as to how that money is committed and what your program is going to be. That's my take on 18. And I say that as just to remind you, because I know it's not always popular to speak against an article that helps fund affordable housing. I spent a fair amount of time at a town meeting, I think 4 years ago, to make sure the first big tranche of money became available to you, the $20 million. And that was not easy. Just to remind you, the finance committee at the time didn't want to do that. And the board came along reluctantly, and I appreciate that. But, you know, I go through that because I don't want to have someone say, gee, Atherton, you're against affordable housing. I'm not. I've stepped before town meeting before. And I may well do so again this Saturday, because I think 18 is just not the right way to go until we get further along in our housing program. And there are lots of parts of the housing question that are not just money related. And I think we need a holistic approach with open community discussions of some length before we make this kind of commitment. So thank you, Brian, for letting me share my thoughts.
Thank you, Rick. And I'll extend that to, 4 years ago when you worked so hard to get us the first 20 tranche and really lift off to the progress we've been able to make the last 4 years. And I do appreciate that you are now here at this meeting and the last one taking part more in the community conversation. So thank you.
Yeah.
Any other members of the public like to make comment on this agenda item? Any summary from the board? Penny?
Sorry, again, just I have a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, maybe to Vicky. What happens if both 18 and 35 pass? Besides bigger tax bills.
I'm really not sure. I think, first of all, the Article 35 won't come into play until the following year anyway. So I think it will give us an opportunity to try to figure that out. And you'll see how much money is actually going to be available anyway through Article 35 if it were to pass. So I think that's a bridge that needs to be crossed at some point, perhaps, if both of them pass. It will be interesting to see whether they
Thank
both.
you. Yeah, I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, it's more.
I think we have heard, Penny, that it would create a budget shortfall in the town's existing budget based on the STR money that they are currently collecting. So they have to rework that for the following meeting and regular budget. To Brooke and then to Meg.
So if both were to pass, the authorization to raise the money is not an obligation to raise the money. Does that make sense? So that if it were required through 35, it would not necessarily have to also be done through the override. Right? So it's an authorization to do it, not a requirement to do it. So,
Meg,
and ultimately, I can imagine a scenario where the select board might vote down things that required funding that would throw the budget into chaos. Right? If this board attempted to use both sources, the select board might say, "Whoa, we can't authorize that because it impinges on the financial security of the town." So, but that's me extrapolating down the road.
And again,
I'm
sorry.
Go ahead, Vicky.
And again, I agree with you, Brooke, and the fact that because it's not going to cut, Article 35 doesn't come into play right away anyway. It will give some time to be able to try to address the potential budget shortfalls and how to best manage it. So it won't put us into, it won't put the town into an immediate issue unless they were going to try to do something this year, which is not the case here. It's the following year.
Thank you, Vicky. Meg, did you have an item?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I can certainly understand the insecurity around voter support for these articles, particularly the override. However, I think the past few years have shown that there's great community support for passing affordable housing, funding. And I think that it's important for this board to echo that sentiment throughout the community. And I appreciate Mr. Atherton's comments about having a community-wide discussion. And I do think that the town needs to take this on as a bigger project with a more holistic approach, but I don't see those things being mutually exclusive. I think there's no reason why we can't support and pass an override now. This is, as Brian says all the time, this is a $500 million solution. $6 million will stabilize us to some degree for the short term while we have those community discussions. As we can see, it obviously takes some time for things to work out. And I think that the message needs to be loud and clear that supporters have continuously approved affordable housing funding through town meeting. They will presumably, I don't have a crystal ball, hopefully continue to do so while we figure out these bigger picture solutions. So I'm just hopeful that Saturday everything passes. And we have the luxury of figuring out with the select board how 35 and 18 play off of each other.
Thank you, Meg. I'll echo some thoughts and sentiments there as well. And I'm hopeful that the community will support 18, like when the community supported Rick and Tobias's article back 4 years ago for the 20 million. It was very clear that creating shy qualified housing was critical. And so this board set out to have a community discussion, create a subcommittee, Neighborhood First, which came back with a very clear mission statement, which I believe we have executed very well, maintaining safe harbor since that money became available. And we have a clear and coherent path to 490 plus units to keep the community in safe harbor from unfriendly 40Bs, which I believe was the original goal in creating affordable housing and of that first Neighborhood First program. So we can move in step with the funding and the conversation. So I'm hopeful the community is supportive right now, because here we are. With that, I think we may have exhausted board comments, questions, general public. So I'll close item 6, town meeting warrant articles, and move to item 7, Dr. Howard Dickler Award, nominations and voting. So Anna, thank you for being here. Please feel free to join the conversation at any point if you want to unmute. I don't see you, so I can't recognize if your attention. But Tucker, I'll come to you to lead this.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And once again, we're incredibly honored to have Anna Martinez here with us today. Howard was a true friend of this board and the housing effort on the island and the community overall. And it's really a great privilege to be able to recognize him in some small way. And so, as you all know, this is the inaugural launch of the annual Dr. Howard Dickler Award. And I'll just read what the trust had written in originally creating this recognition. And we said that the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust has created an annual Citizens Award as a tribute to the late Dr. Howard Dickler. Dr. Dickler was a valuable member of our community whose involvement in housing and economic issues was greatly appreciated by the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust through his regular attendance and participation at public meetings, as well as his service on the Neighborhood First Committee, which mapped a guide for the trust's use of funds in effort to maintain safe harbor from 40B developments. This award will honor a community member who best exhibits the spirit of Dr. Dickler on housing advocacy for our year-round community through their dedication, drive, creativity, inclusiveness, and most of all, perhaps, fearless willingness to share ideas. As you all know, we have received 3 nominations for the award. Those are Richard Hussey, affiliated with Habitat, Beth Ann Meehan, who has a few housing affiliations, the Housing Authority, Habitat for Humanity, prior work with Housing Nantucket, and finally, Billy Cassidy. Those are the names that we have received to date, and I turn it back to the board really to consider those and perhaps others in making their vote for this initial honoree. the way we're going to conduct this is after you all have had a chance to discuss, I would ask that you individually email me with your vote. And Rima Sherry has terrifically been able to coordinate with Sarah Alger to actually have the first recipient's name announced at town meeting this year. So that is the process, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Tucker. Penny,
Yeah, I realize we're in a public meeting, but whatever the result is here, are we supposed to like not talk about it between now and town meeting if Sarah's going to make the announcement, or is that just sort of pro forma?
I think it's public surprise is the goal.
Okay, so keep my mouth shut.
Yes.
The only thing I want to say about the 3 nominees is every single one of them deserves this award and this honor. I'm particularly happy that it's a citizen award and not somebody who's, no offense to anybody working in this arena for the town. And that's all I have to say about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Brooke?
I concur. I mean, all 3 nominees have done yeoman's work for many, many, many years. So, and I would be delighted with whomever we select.
Sorry, I can't get all my thoughts in one time. I'd also
Thank
want
you,
to
Brooke. Go ahead, Penny.
Yeah, I also want to point out that each one of these individuals not only has done the yeoman's work, but they've done it quietly and with tenacity and perseverance, and nobody's out there looking to be recognized. So thank you.
Thank you, Penny. It's hard not to just echo the 2 of you. I'm in agreement. There's not a lot to say. That they're all great candidates. So I'm thrilled that we were able to have 3 candidates in the inaugural year, and I look forward to having this conversation again in 5 years and then again in 10. So Meg or Dave, do you have any commentary? No. Okay, so I think we all have our instructions on that to email our choices to Tucker, and we'll find out when we find out. So rather exciting. And would you like a minute before I close the item?
Brian, thank you very much for this opportunity. It really is a tremendous, wonderful thing that's being done. And my family and I are just incredibly, incredibly honored and pleased with this award, a recognition of Howard in this fashion. It's really very, very moving, and it means a great deal to us. So thank you very much for everything that you've done, all of you, to make this happen. Thank you again.
Of course, and I'd like to thank you because I know how much time and commitment Howard put into just our board, and I know he did that across many others as well. And I know, with my wife on the other side of the screen right now trying to get my attention, I know how much time that takes away from significant others. So I thank you and all your support of him.
Well, we did sometimes have to rush back home so he could participate in some of these meetings, but it was all worth it. And I certainly share his views, so it was perfectly fine. But thanks. You made me laugh. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, with that, we'll close item number 7, and we'll look to other business on item 8. So we have another meeting on May 16th via Zoom. The time's not on there, Tucker, but I'm assuming it's at 1 o'clock. Is that what we're doing, or 12:30?
I
1?
think we're 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing 1 from Brooke. Okay, great.
Sorry.
Penny?
Yeah, just quick question. Are we going to go back to monthly meetings or every 2 weeks? Are we going to continue every 2 weeks? Does anybody know? Or maybe we'll talk about that in May 16th at that meeting.
We can talk about that in May. I think that there's a lot of work to do.
We intended to do it through town meeting. Do every 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay. Brooke, did you have a separate comment, question? No? And then is there any other business? Anything that wasn't, Meg?
Actually, just to jump back, if I could throw my 2 cents out there. If by meeting bi-monthly, we are able to have somewhat shorter meetings, I think it's a little bit easier to schedule in like an hour and a half than like a 3-hour meeting. So personally, I just want to throw that out there because I know we do have a lot of ground to cover each time we meet. So I just want you to know that I'm available for that.
Okay, great. Shanta?
I agree with Meg. I love that idea.
Awesome. I got a thumbs up from Brooke. I echo it. I do have, personally, my wife is expecting a child at the end of June, so the beginning of July, let's call me out for the month of July. So just everybody be aware of that. Okay, so we'll close other business and we'll look to board comments. Are there any board comments on existing topics, new topics? Seeing none, close board comments. Item number 8, executive session. Look for a motion for us to adjourn to executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or real value of property where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. Before I do that and look for a motion, Tucker's waving his hand. 1 second. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So moving into executive session, can we please start that like in 10 minutes versus immediately?
I think I'm seeing general head nodding, so it's 1:42 now, so it'd start at 1:50. Yes,
2. Okay, I'll make the motion that Sully just made, that Sully just read.
red. Okay.
That we end this regular meeting for the purpose of going into executive session, not to return to the regular meeting for the purpose that Sully stated.
Second.
Second from Dave by roll call. Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Meg, Brooke Mohr.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, Brian Sullivan. So we'll see you there in 10 minutes, 1:53.